we are fortunate enough to have three of our faculties with us. Please give it up for Professor Paul Schulz. For Dr. Michał Ślęzak. And of course, for Dr. Ali Jawaid. And please, for me to the moderator, Dr. Ismail Gbadamosi. All right, thank you very much. So I will be moderating this, and for the first part of the discussion, to try to touch on the theme of the school on the role of metabolism in neurodegeneration. And I would like to start with you, Paul, if you don't mind, especially given where the role, the paradoxical role of metabolism in neurodegeneration is. So clearly we now know there's a role for the body in the metabolism in the periphery in driving neurodegeneration. So where are we right now with understanding this, and where do you think we are going with the brain-body connection?
Well, honestly, you may know more about metabolism than I do. Immunology and metabolism are two areas that just keep showing up and driving things, and so I'm learning about them as I go. It's not my focus. But I will say that where I see it the most right now, which was kind of surprising to me, is I collaborate with some basic scientists who work on the APOE4 gene and trying to understand why it affects the risk of Alzheimer's disease. And they find some very big changes in lipid metabolism and lipid storage in the brain. And we're testing a drug that they've developed now that seems to be an antidote to the effect of the dyslipidomics in the APOE4 genotype persons. They're telling me, so we did spinal taps. It turns out, I don't know, you guys probably know this more than I do, there's like 200 different kinds of lipids in spinal fluid and more than that in blood. And so we had to do spinal taps at baseline rather than blood because a lot of the brain stuff gets lost in the noise there. And so we did spinal taps on 12 people, gave them the drug for 6 months and did spinal taps again. And they're telling me the lipid profiles are changing enough that we'll apply for more funding to do it further. So I'm skirting around the issue because I don't know as much about metabolism as you, but just to say that I've discovered that it turns out to be important in ways that I didn't anticipate.
So I know at the very beginning of Ali's career, this was some part of what he was working on when he originally had this observation about the how diabetes was in some sense protective. So if you could comment on this, on the role of Ali's metabolism protection, where we are.
Yeah, so I remember actually, like when we started doing this research, it was very anti-dogmatic, right? I mean, like there's like a saying which I think all medical students and almost everyone knows, that they think that diabetes is the mother of all diseases. And then we coming up with this claim that it actually is protective. I mean, there was a lot of resistance to that. Like starting from like, we wanted to check it like by multiple ways, cross-validate our findings. But interestingly, what happened around the same time is that some other people started showing that other metabolic disorders like dyslipidemia were also having this, positive disease modifying effect. And then I remember like there were a couple of clinicians besides like Dr. Schulz over there, and they were like, we've never seen like, somebody who, was not lean to have ALS. So this is an observation which had been going on for a long time, but it's only now that we started studying it in a more standardized way. And I guess like the idea is not that you tell people to fatten up so that we are, to mitigate the disease, but instead this shows that metabolism has an integral, contribution to the pathogenesis and pathophysiology of certain neurodegenerative disorders. Then we try to figure out, okay, what are the molecular hallmarks of these? So is it something related to TDP? Is it something related to amyloid? Is it something related to tau? And by doing these cross-comparison analysis, getting more cell type specific, we can then figure out, okay, so it is one particular cell type, probably a couple of converging pathways, related to metabolism, which are making the neurons susceptible, to oxidative damage or whatever kind of insult. And then that defines which pathways we'll target in terms of therapies.
So I think what's also interesting is that it's not just in the context of neurodegenerative diseases. So metabolism also tends to come up and also play a role in neuropsychiatric disorder. And I think this is some of the focus of your lab. Michał, I don't know if you could comment on that a little bit.
Sure. And I have the same answer as Paul gives. So, I mean, it's not the concept that was created out of the blue. It's the data which points to the concept. The same as in neurodegeneration. Immunology and metabolism are the two features which show up constantly in neuropsychiatric disorders. So I would say that this is the general topic of how the brain and body are linked, and how the same processes which are disrupted in the periphery actually translate to the brain dysfunction. In that particular context, I actually believe that the progress can be made if we focus on glial cells, and how, like, the general hypothesis that this might be actually the primary deficit inducing secondary dysfunction of neurons, because glial cells are the ones performing immune and metabolic functions in the brain primarily. So that's the general concept. So yeah.
And if I could just add one more thing. So I know maybe it's a provocative statement, but a lot of times I believe that neuroscientists, they think outside the box, but they don't think outside the brain. And the more we think outside the brain, we learn actually that, the integration of all peripheral signals is crucial, and it is done by glia, not directly neurons, and unless we understand that, I guess we'll stay in the box.
So I guess the key thing here is we need to really move from the neurocentric approach to understanding the disease of the brain, neuropsychiatric disorder, to then begin to couple other cell types, not just the neurons, and also what's also happening in the periphery. So which brings me to my next question, because we now see this trend in new metabolism drugs that are popping and making waves, the likes of the ones that are used in weight loss, the one that's used to manage diabetes. So I think potentially some of these drugs might have some advantages in some of these diseases. So I don't know if you could comment on that, Professor.
Yeah, one of the things we talked about is how inflammation seems to be the final common pathway to neuronal loss in Alzheimer's. It might be in other ones as well, at least in the mouse models, other ones. I lost my train of thought.
Metformin,
General effects of
semaglutide.
Ozempic, yeah. So it turns out that it's very hard to find compounds that are anti-inflammatory in the brain that cross the blood-brain barrier, and semaglutide is one of them. So we've actually, for 3 years, we've been giving people placebo-controlled semaglutide versus not. It's a little more complicated nowadays because we have the 2 disease-modifying therapies I mentioned. So all of our patients are on the disease-modifying therapy, and then half are on semaglutide, half are not. In theory, I'm blinded to what's going on, but in truth, I can see half of them are losing weight, losing their appetite. But I think there's several ways semaglutide may turn out to be, God willing, very helpful. One is the anti-inflammatory effect, so a direct effect on the disease. But the other is that all of the other things that get better with weight loss, all those metabolic disorders, metabolic syndrome, are all the things that are risk factors for Alzheimer's as well. So losing weight, lower cholesterol, lower sugar, lower cholesterol, all of them we've shown independently affect the risk of Alzheimer's progressing, the risk of getting it, and then the risk of progressing. So it may be that semaglutide has 5 different mechanisms by which it lowers the risk of Alzheimer's or slows progression. I did want to say that, it triggered our whole series of studies on metabolic activity affecting ALS. We had a big ALS center where I was at Baylor College of Medicine, and when Ali visited, we were working on those 2,500 ALS patients that had been seen over 20 years. And I'll never forget, the diabetes one was shocking, I thought. But the real shocker was one day we decided to plot out the weight of people versus their progression rate. And oh my God, yeah, the people who were really heavy, which is not very common in ALS, those were the ones that after 3 years were still stable. They were weak, but they were stably weak. And the ones that were 100 pounds, oh my God, 9 months, 12 months, we would lose them, you know, just a shocker. And again, the cause and effect there is more challenging as being heavy protective or vice versa. But either way, it's quite an influence of metabolism on the neurodegenerative disease.
Wow. That's really interesting. I tend to show this data, by the way, in many of my presentations. It's one of the what I used to tell my audience about how we have this paradoxical relationship between weight loss and the progression of ALS. And till date, even when I talk about the data, I still find it very surprising. So for the purpose of the theme of the school, where we're having this panel discussion, and for the purpose of the audience, by the way, please, if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask. You just have to come to the microphone to speak to the microphone. For basic scientists like myself and many of the students that are seated here today, what should be the focus? What should we be doing so that we can really move the field forward? Michał, maybe you want to say something?
The same thing as everything in every aspect of science. Be curious and be driven by your own scientific interests. I mean, there is no way, if you have your scientific interest, that you are wrong. I mean, just follow what you think is important. That's really the best advice I can get.
Okay, Ali, any comment?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just add to that, which is based on observation, that lately you see young scientists and actually also PIs getting very excited about new techniques, but they've stopped chasing questions, you know. And I think that's very important. Like, in the end, techniques are good to learn, you know, it's great. These are tools, but the tools are there to address, like, you know, these clinical observations, or sometimes you can come up with a really crazy hypothesis yourself. And then you first go to a clinician, collaborate with them, see if there is a hint in the data which supports your hypothesis, then come to the bench and try to figure it all out. So, you know, chase questions. Science should be about questions, not about the tools.
Okay. So in our audience here, we also have students in medical school. And as a clinician, Professor Paul, if you could maybe have some tips for this group of students.
Yeah. So I actually, like, after residency, I trained in the lab for 5 years, and I had a lab. Ali and I were talking about it last night. I trained in this morning, I trained in neurophysiology, which was really hot back in the day, a few decades ago. And but if I had been born 3 years later, I would have done genetics. But when I finished residency and was looking at fellowships and what direction to take, Gregor Mendel was still crossing green peas and white peas and finding, you know, and so it really wasn't a good option at that time. I thought, yeah, I got his autograph, by the way. So, yeah, and physiology. I mean, even the talks yesterday, my mouth waters when I see the physiology talks. They're so great. You're talking to the individual cells. You can LTP them, LTD them, whatever. It's just fascinating. But anyway, the point is that I trained at that, and it was good to have that cross-training, even though I eventually left the basic sciences, because physiology just really, for Alzheimer's, it got superseded by other techniques that are more powerful. But having trained at that, I can think more rigorously, and also I understand when one of the basic scientists says, well, we've got this hang up or whatever, I understand where they're coming from and the challenges they have, and also what they can do in the other direction. Like when I was here in April, I talked about our vaccine studies. Well, there's a case where I then went to the basic scientists and said, hey guys, look at this finding here. Can we study that in the mouse models? And sure enough, and I have some idea that could happen. Anyway, what I'm getting at is the crosstalk. If you train a lot in one area and a little in the other, so a lot in your PhD, a little in healthcare, or a lot in healthcare and a little in your PhD, in your basic science, it's valuable because you know a little bit about the other side, and also it gives you the rigor so that my papers sound more like a basic scientist than a clinician writing, hopefully. And yeah, so real valuable. And the last thing I'll say about that is everything I talk about, for 99% of it, except for the vaccinations going the other way, smart people in the lab had to come up with first. Someone had to figure out that we all have autoantibodies and they attach to amyloid, and then to find the B cells they came from, and then test it in an animal model and all. Then they talk to us on the clinical side. And we take it from there to test it out in humans. But everything relies on. So anyway, the stuff you guys are doing in the lab is absolutely critical. And one last item now. I lied. That was the second to the last. One of my collaborators, every 6 months, has a meeting of his group, basic science group, and they have something called like out of this world ideas. And all they do is think of outlandish ideas. And then at the end of the day of doing that, they decide which one or two are the best to test. And I think that's a really good way of codifying what you said, Ali, about it's hard to think outside the box when you're in it every day doing stuff. But if you make the effort to think outside with other people too, because everybody's got different great ideas, I think that's a great idea for all of us.
Thank you very much for sharing all of that. If I could still stay with you on this next question regarding career, because I see you've had a beautiful career. You still have a beautiful career and very admirable with all of what you've contributed to the field. So what moments or what decision really shaped your career from really early on, from a young age?
Oh, there's a lot of them. Well, to study medicine and science probably has to do with the fact that my grandmother had multiple sclerosis, and she lived with us as a kid. And I saw what happened. This was in the, well, I don't want to say the decade, but it was a long time ago when there was no treatment at all for it. That had a huge impact on me, because I thought, Jesus, if I could help a little bit on multiple sclerosis, I could help a lot of people who are really suffering from it. I mean, she was wheelchair bound, and I loved her, but she always smelled like urine because she was incontinent. And, you know, as a 5-year-old kid, you remember that kind of stuff. It had a big impact on me. Now, when I got into medicine, I realized I liked cognitive function even more than I liked autoimmune disorders. So I ended up going in that direction. But there's things in life that give you a personal feeling about an area and a motivation and also an empathy. Like when I'm seeing patients, I understand where they're coming from to an extent because I've lived with a neurologic disease in the family, and then other people have had strokes and so forth. All of those things are important. And then I don't want to monopolize this, but along your career, there's many decisions you make that make a huge impact on how things go. And maybe the other gentlemen want to take it from there. I mean, you may also want to talk about your early life experience, but so many decisions are critical for getting you in the right direction. It's so easy to get sidetracked is the point. And to get, one of my former fellows now, he's running a residency program and doing admin stuff. So he's only a quarter clinical now. Well, he's going to have a hard time getting off the bottom rung of research with that. I don't like to say that too explicitly to him, but I tell him, Anyway, all these decisions are critical for how your career goes.
Okay. If I could come to you, Michał, also the same question. Now you lead your lab and focusing on developing tools and techniques to understand astrocyte biology in the context of neuropsychiatric disorders. And you've managed to establish a very beautiful team where you now have these techniques slowly emerging. So what has really helped, what decision through your early days in your career has helped you to get up to this point where you now lead your own lab and now contributing to the tools and techniques that we can use to understand these sciences?
So, because I mean, it's really like almost unrelated. What really matters is a combination of my curiosity and people I met. Like it really basically comes to this very simple function. Curiosity, because there is something that's internal that brought me to the topic of the brain research, and that was like high school, like spontaneous interest, choosing like interdisciplinary studies, which would include biological, mathematics, chemistry, and then this was something spontaneous that steered me towards biology and brain research. But the particular topic in brain research is almost purely the people I've met, which were just matching my personality. It's as simple as that, and that it has to be some equation for that, which I don't know. But maybe if I met people who would be interested, I don't know, in Drosophila genetics, I would be doing Drosophila genetics. I don't know. But somehow I ended up like being really curious about astrocytes, and then this on the way I met the really excellent mentors, and that was absolutely crucial to what I was doing and where I am right now.
Yeah.
Not really complicated.
So I think the last word you said, the mentorship, which is where I would like to ask Ali this question, because also for me, I would have to agree with you that good mentorship really helps in many ways. So Ali, you were recently just listed as part of the top 2 scientists in the world moving science forward. Congratulations on that. And I would like to stay with you for a moment, if you could touch on the subject of mentorship. How has this really helped to shape your career to get up to this point where you now have done science, quality, good science, to a point of recognition, that the kind of recognition you now have?
Thank you, Ismail. You're very kind. I think, like, for me, I've had an excellent mentor sitting right over here, and I think I've learned a lot from him about not only doing good science, but also about the human spirit. How you genuinely make people feel that you are invested in their career and in their well-being. And I think the moment you start showing that, like, automatically, unless you're working with someone, who is dysfunctional for like several reasons, sometimes life happens, but let's say someone who, has good health and good mental well-being, they will respond very positively. So you just show that you're invested in their science, in their development, and in their well-being, like just these 3 things. And I think this is like I said, I learned a lot from Dr. Schulz. And then the other thing was that he also allowed me to have complete intellectual freedom. I look back at how I used to be like 18 years ago, and sometimes I would come up with like really ridiculous ideas, and he had the patience to sit there, and he was like, great idea, let's talk about it, and then we'll try to sort it out. And I try to do the same. And actually, I think, you also have to find like a balance between like, when to be friendly, and like, just for the lack of like a more appropriate word, I would say when to be a little bit more assertive, So if you have students, you are their best friend when things are not working out. When things are working out, you tell them, okay, now it's working, so go do your job, And I think this balance is the key. Like, you also can't dwell on success and celebrations for too long. You also can't dwell on failures for too long. Either way, we are here to figure it all out, so that we don't die wondering. And even if we die wondering, it's perfectly fine, because we were still active using our brains to figure out both, life of science and science of life.
Thank you very much for that response. If I could still stay with you on the next question, because now mentoring is, of course, a very key component of having a very excellent career, as you've pointed out. It's also worked for me. I was just sharing with a couple of colleagues during lunch about how important it is to have someone who not only gives you a chance, but also willing to see you through the whole process. For those watching and listening, Ali has been my mentor for the past 5 years, and everything I've done. Also, when I look at myself 5 years ago and I look at myself, I'm like, wow, a lot has changed. I feel way, way better than how I used to be. And thanks in many parts to the kind of mentorship I've had from you. But for all the young scientists we have at home, not everybody is always fortunate to end up with someone who has this kind of thinking that you have, that your mentor has, and they get to be stuck in that lab or with that PI because unfortunately it's the only position they can land. Then what's your advice for an early career scientist who is trying to find their own career identity, but they don't have the opportunity to find a good mentor who's going to nurture them to their full potential?
Again, I would say you're very kind, Ismail. Like whatever you've achieved, it's all to your credit.
Thank you very much.
And second, I'd add, of course, like it's hard to find mentors who would want to invest in you, right? So that's where you have to think about human psychology a little bit. Why would someone want to invest in you? Like they would want to invest in you when they would see that you would bring something to the table, when they see you invested in their ideas, their research, So I think, like for me, it's very important that, when like a young scientist approaches a mentor, it has to be a little bit more than, I'm really fascinated by neuroscience. I'm really fascinated by your research. Fascination is great. But, for me, I would love to mentor someone who would come to me and be like, okay, you did this paper, but I think your findings, this was missing. Maybe if you did this experiment, and then like I would be like, wow, and you see in my lab, like, there are people who correct me, and I have so much respect for them, and I think this is very important, that you actually try to like really don't think about, your aim should never be to impress someone so that they like, start mentoring you. It should always be about, what you will contribute to the field. Can you help them refine their own ideas? And the third thing I would be is never be desperate. You are not dependent on a mentor. Like, like I'm talking about you. You will one day outgrow your mentors, and they'll be very proud of you. So it's like no young scientist should be like, okay, no, I will work with this person, and that will be the only path to success. If they're too busy, if they're not investing into you, someone else will start investing into you, and you will make it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Michał, can I ask you the same question? I mean, for most of the young scientists here, what advice would you give to them to create their own scientific identity and grow through their career?
Yeah, I think I very much appreciate the role of a mentor, but it's not like I only was working in a very nice and positive environment. It happened to me to work in toxic environments, and that was also my choice. Of course, I wouldn't know beforehand whether I selected the toxic environment. I was mostly driven by the quality of this environment, which turned out to be toxic, like the name for the place. Nevertheless, what I wanted to say is, because Ali really nicely summarized what is a good mentor, but I would like also to take on and what to do if you are not so lucky. So, first of all, you should really talk to your future mentor. You really should make enough time, spend enough time to explore about your potential future mentor. Would it be for a PhD or postdoc? Then if everything goes well, it's okay. But if things don't go well, I would say don't wait. And try to solve the situation, like be as open as you can. And if you cannot be open, that's already a very serious sign that that's not the best place for you. If you can be open, like let's try to discuss what's the issue, what is the issue, and try to solve the actual problem. Try to figure out what the actual problem is and try to solve it. And but if nothing works, just don't wait and change the environment, because as I said, there is absolutely no point on getting yourself into a position when you're desperate, right? I guess if it all goes like, but I think it should be always mutual. I very rarely. I don't think it can be unidirectional. You are bad or your mentor is bad. Somehow there is always a lack of communication, and somehow there is just a misunderstanding of expectations, right? And those things happen, right? Sometimes you can find a common language very quickly, sometimes not. Sometimes it requires certain polishing, some time, some adaptations. But if you see that nothing is working and this is just exceeding your capacity, I witnessed situations where people would change the lab after 2 years of their PhD, and they would end up very successful in the almost lab next door. So it was not about those people; it was about the relationship or about the mentor itself, so on and so forth.
Right? All right. Okay, thank you very much for that response. If I could ask you, because I'm sure you've mentored a lot of people in your through their career, and they've gone on to be successful. If you could look through all of these people you've mentored, and you could identify a common trait or characteristic that you think they shared in some sense to be able to receive the kind of mentorship you could afford them and then go on to be successful, what would that be?
Boy, that's a good, complicated question. I'm going to back up one step and say that the biggest thing I've learned is that the decisions I don't want to make turn out to be the most important decisions I've ever made. And what I mean by that is I was at an institution where I trained, and I thought I'd be there my whole career, and it had some financial problems and other problems. I didn't want to move. I couldn't imagine moving. And, but my hand was kind of forced, and I made the decision to move. Best thing I ever did. I got to another institution, and the opportunities there and everything has just been wonderful, and things have thrived. Another one was, I mentioned earlier about training in physiology, and I had a physiology lab for years. Broke my heart to consider closing it. But best decision I ever made, because now I'm not spending time on patch clamping. I'm giving material to geneticists and epigeneticists and metabolic people and lipid people and all that, and collaborating on lots of things. It's opened up a whole different set of possibilities there that I couldn't do by myself. In fact, it's really great because instead of just having one technique and one question, I've got 20 different ones that I'm working at. And then to get back to your question, so my son's an MD PhD student at my institution, and he's in the 5th year of the PhD. And about the end of the first year, the second year, we used to have dinner every Thursday night. We both like sushi, so we picked sushi place around town each week. And I said to him, Jonathan, your mentor's a nice guy, but he's really not, in my opinion, going to be the right guy for you. Again, it's not someone's bad or good. It's just not a right fit. And I was telling Ollie in the car on the way here, my son is doing programming to analyze epigenetic data. It turns out it's its whole area, right? Well, the whole lab is getting epigenetic data, and they don't know how to analyze it, so he's doing the programming. Well, that means he's on 8 projects this much instead of 1 project this much. And he's functioning more like the programmer for the group than he is a PhD student. And that's just one of the things. And he's someone who has the idea of going down with the ship, so to speak. So and hearing this from his old man wasn't gonna. If it was one of my students, they would go with it. But for your own son, he's got to figure it out himself. Well, he stayed with the guy. Now he's in the 5th year and struggling to get the thesis out and papers out because it's so disjoint, different projects he's worked on. Anyway, that was really another key moment in his life not to change. But I think now he's seeing the other side of it. And I think for his postdoc and faculty spot, he'll have a totally different feeling now about, you know what? I didn't want to make that decision. It's a tough decision, but making the decision was the best thing, you could ever do. It reminds me a lot of deciding to get married, actually. When I was 30 years old, I was petrified of the idea of getting married. Best thing I ever did, but it was really tough. And this is exactly the same thing. Not that your mentor relationship is like marrying someone, but it sort of is. And you got to both be invested in the situation.
All right, thank you. Very interesting anecdote there. So in this next session, we just want to touch briefly on some trendy topic regarding the use of AI in research. And I want to stay with you because I know at the time of the start of your career, there was not even so much going on with the internet or the computer. And still, so I imagine you've seen different era, and now you are still doing science and still a physician at a time where AI has become the main thing. It has come, and I think it has come to stay. How do you use it in your day-to-day in research in science?
I'll tell you, when I started in the lab, the physiology data, we had it on floppies, and it could only hold a megabyte or something like that. And oh my God, but I'll never forget, there's been 2 decisions in my life that I made that were the wrong decisions. Well, maybe there's more than two, but there's two that really stick out. Two that I'm going to say publicly. So one of my grad students in the early 90s was doing a great job learning to patch clamp and that kind of stuff. And he said to me one day, take a look at this here. And I came over to his DEC. Is that a familiar? It's a computer company back then. DEC was as popular as Microsoft would be today, for computers. And he said, look at this here. And it was command line stuff. You would put a command line to do something, right? Now all that program is in the background. And he said, look at this. I'm logged into a computer elsewhere in the world. And I said, well, what do you learn there? He said, well, there's nothing on the computer that's public, but I'm logged onto it. And I said, well, and this was he says, this is what the internet's going to do. And I'm like, who's going to put stuff on there that you can look at? Why would they do that? So he ended up leaving the lab, marrying one of my other grad students. They went to California, and he became a software guy. And he's in San Francisco, which is like the Mecca, and he's been very successful at the internet. It's software, but essentially, it's one of those things that, back then it didn't make any sense. So we've come full circle now. Now even I know the value of AI. We've got a whole school of biomedical informatics and a school of public health, and there are basically hundreds of scientists who like to analyze data. And I've gotten involved with them because I can tell them my opinions about important questions to look at. That's how the vaccine studies came out. We were looking through for things that accidentally affected Alzheimer's disease. Anyway, the point is that they can do so much now with 93 million records, medical records, that back then, paper and pencil, you could look at 100 people you saw, and that was it. So the AI is absolutely revolutionizing our ability to figure out things that affect the neurodegenerative diseases in a way that we just couldn't possibly intuit 40 years ago when the internet was.
I guess it has come, and for sure it has come to stay. But then it's also important to still know where to draw the line, right? Where the boundaries are. So, Michał, in your own opinion, where do you think we should put the line? Where's the ethical boundaries to the use of AI, especially in medical research, in basic medical research, in your opinion?
I think very short answer that comes to my mind is whenever artificial intelligence interferes with natural intelligence. So I think the natural intelligence always should have the priority. And what I mean by that, if you understand what you're doing, and if you really understand what is the purpose of using AI, then it makes sense. If you think that AI will solve, any conceptual problem, it will not, right? So things like big data analysis, obviously, but even there, you should understand what this thing is doing to your data. So the least is the disease of a black box, the more probable that there is sense of using AI, right? But natural intelligence priority.
Okay. So just to be able to touch on the theme of the school where we have students who are listening to you right now, Ali, what would be your recommendation on how to use AI better, especially for them, for your day-to-day in writing, in thinking, in generating ideas and stuff like that? So what would be your recommendation for young scientists like myself and other younger scientists in basic medical science, how to incorporate the use of AI in their day-to-day science life?
So I'd agree with Michał, and I'll also add that use of AI, is great. Like everyone should know how to use it to your advantage. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. But when it starts interfering with natural intelligence, of course, that's bad. Also, it's bad when it starts interfering with your creativity. And I think this is where I feel, just try one thing, like write like a joke on ChatGPT and ask it to refine it. It will kill the humor. It will kill the humor. It will turn your joke into something politically very correct, right? And the same way, it kind of tones down the creativity of things. Because like AI is based on like whatever is out there, right? A lot of data which is out there. It's just large language models. Now the thing is that there is generative AI, which is like, intelligent and is creative, but that creativity is also guided by what is present on the large language model. So in the end, like, you will never have crazy ideas from AI. However, when you have crazy ideas, you can refine them through AI, because AI can tell you which one of it will be feasible or not. But then also the important thing is, don't allow AI to make you delusional, right? Because in the end, the more you converse with ChatGPT, like on your ideas, eventually it will start agreeing with you, no matter, how flawed the idea is. So use it once. I think it's perfectly fine. So you, like, for example, you don't have to upload your whole paper on ChatGPT, but at the same time, if you have like a nice data set and you have written it, write it there and ask it to point out if there are any weaknesses or deficiencies there. And I think sometimes it gives you very good advice about, troubleshooting protocols. You can write simple codes with it. So these are just some of the things for which AI is definitely very powerful. Now, if you are using AI to write emails, I don't take it personally when I see an email written by ChatGPT. I know half the world is doing it now. There was one day in January this year when ChatGPT was down, and the emails all of a sudden became impolite and aggressive, And the reason they became impolite and aggressive is that now we don't even try to make our emails more, sort of empowering and, without this microaggression, because ChatGPT does it for us, right? So it has already started to affect our creativity. The other thing is that little tricks. Don't use too many exclamation marks, not these big dashes, M dashes, which don't exist on your keyboard, but they exist in ChatGPT. And when you see something written with that, you know that it's ChatGPT generated. So use it smartly, use it to your advantage, and use it in a way that your creativity is not compromised.
All right, thank you very much. So we are now slowly coming to wrap up this panel discussion. One very important thing I think we should be able to talk about is work-life balance. Well, especially for us young scientists, when we see seasoned scientists like yourself.
You selected perfect guests for that.
Maybe if I could start with you, Paul, on the first question. So I think, what habits or boundaries have you set that has really helped you to have a work-life balance through your career, you'd say?
Listen to what my wife tells me to do. I come home now. The kids are wild. And now it's the grandkids that are coming over. Come home now and be with the grandkids. No, that's a really good question. I was talking to some people earlier about that. It's not easy, and I'm not sure I've ever actually figured it out. But I do try to be constantly aware of what's going on at work and not at work. The work stuff is limitless. You could literally spend all your time there. And there's a few people I work with who do. I'm not sure that's the secret to happiness, though. So I'm not sure how to answer the question except to say that the awareness of it and making it a focus over on, not on the side there. And I'd be curious, actually, if you asked my kids, was I successful at it or not? I think our relationship has changed over time, but I think they thought I was too busy when they were young. And now I think they think I'm more accessible, which is true. And I'm not sure I really had the right balance when they were younger. But thank God my wife was very involved with the kids, overly involved with the kids, and so they turned out well. But yeah, and I'm making a bigger effort with the grandkids and all that. And they're so damn cute. You can't help it.
That's really nice to hear. Michał, if I could come to you.
Yeah.
I mean, for example,
did you actually read what's written there? You should read. What I want to say, maybe one thing, it's very frequent. Well, not very frequent. A couple of major decisions I've made professional decisions were completely and entirely driven through personal reasons, right? So the place I was working, or this was really driven by personal arrangements, and this is something which I hear during recruitments and so on very, very frequently. And I don't think that place of work makes you decides whether you're a good scientist or not. I think if you want to be a scientist, it's really you can accommodate it with your personal, let's call it limitations or just personal arrangements, right? This can be done. I have no doubt. And the second thing, it's always personal, because there was a period of my life when I had really I was working and I had a very nice life with the frequent friends, hobbies, and so on and so forth. It ended up because I realized that I'm not actually, I lost something which is very important for me, which is scientific aspect, like going deep into science. And that was the moment where I actually switched again to a mode where I was much more into science. I don't judge or anything, whether it's good or bad or anything like that. It's just the observation that it's, again, a personal matter, whether you are, how much you want to commit, and it varies between people. And for my taste, I like to go deep, and people who work with me, they know that I really like to work in a certain mode. Like I like to focus. I need time to go deep into the trouble, into the problem, and I like to spend time on one problem, right? So that's also what I need to deliver, let's say, from my perspective.
So I guess it's something that's just very personal to decide how to manage the work-life balance components of being a scientist. And just to wrap up, to come back to you, Ali, if you could look at your younger self and look at how you've grown through science right now, how would you advise the younger scientists on, how to try to, in some sense, incorporate and try to balance being a scientist and still being a human and still being able to enjoy life?
Okay, I think it's something which is very individual. So whatever I say would perhaps apply to me and nobody else, or maybe some other people would want to adhere to it. But what I would say is that, there's one thing about science which is very consistent, that it will, for most of the scientists, you do become a logical person. You do learn, to organize your thoughts in a certain way. And that actually is also very helpful in your life, because a lot of times, when you are in a chaotic situation, you start breaking things down just the way you would start breaking down a complex hypothesis into small experimental aims, So for me, science has actually improved my life a lot, I would say. But on the other hand, science also gives you certain constraints, especially when you write grants and they tell you, justify your budget. So then, it also starts reflecting on your life. So it's very important to have a creative hobby, which gives you the freedom to get in touch with your creativity, with your chaos, inner chaos, with your darkness, whatever it is. So for me, that's writing. So I write fiction and poetry, and I think that allows me to really escape from science and go into this world where nothing makes sense to anyone else, but it would make sense to me. But when I do science, then I want to make sense to everyone else, even when sometimes it doesn't make sense to me. So I think it's very important to have that one, it could be music, it could be dancing, it could be anything where you can be intensely creative.
Thank you very much, Ali, for sharing that insight. It's been a very beautiful conversation, and we could keep this going on and on and on. And I imagine there are some questions for the panelists. So we would end this session here. And please, if you have any questions, feel free to approach any of the panelists to ask your questions, and feel free to interact with them. But in the meantime, thank you very much for taking time with us. Please, a round of applause for the panelists.
You too. Okay.